to Ordinary People Podcast, where it's not about likes and views. It's about motivating, inspiring, and informing you. I want to thank you all for listening to this podcast and for being here with me today. You could be anywhere else, listening to anything else, but you're here with me. So let's get right into this. When I ask people about black history before slavery, tell me something about your history before slavery, I never get a response, or people will say, hey, I'll call you back and I'll let you know what I learned about it, what I know about it. The truth is, I never get that phone call back. I'd be feeling like, darn, would I ask somebody for some money or something? Ask to borrow money? Because you know when you ask people to borrow money, they'll say to you, yeah, I'll give you a call back and let you know what I got or what I can offer you. But you never receive a call back, and then when you call them to try to check in and see if they can still loan you the money, you don't get no response. It's the same kind of response I get when I ask people about, tell me something about your history before slavery. It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation because most people don't know much about their existence before slavery. Some people believe that black people's history began at slavery. And why not? When you watch all these movies, when you listen to history class, how often do you hear about anything about black history before slavery? When Black History Month comes, what do you hear about? Everything that you discussed in Black History Month is all post-slavery. It all happened after slavery. Black people invented this and they invented that, but it was all after slavery. We talk about civil rights all after slavery. What about what happened before slavery? And how does slavery play a part in the oppression we feel today? I told you we got a lot to get into. Movies like 12 Years a Slave, Roots. How do they play a part in us mentally being oppressed? Well, it's a constant reminder of what we dealt with when we were slaves, when black people were slaves. Think about it, 12 Years a Slave. Think about the context of that movie. Black man doing well for his family, musician, gets kidnapped by two white men after getting drunk and enjoying an opportunity that was given to him. Free black man gets forced in slavery, gets snatched out of his home and taken away from his family and forced to be a slave for 12 years, missing the most critical time of his children's life. 12 years of his life he'll never get back. Forced to be a slave. Then you sit there and you watch movies like The Butler and look at the context of very important matters that happened in that movie. Similar to there was a scene where the gentleman who played the butler was out in the cotton field picking cotton with his mother and his father. His mother was snatched away from them, took into a shack and raped by a white man. The young man heard it. The father looking at his father helplessly, as his father looked helplessly, because if he knew if he responded, that he would be killed. He will be murdered if he responded to his wife getting raped. After seeing his wife coming out of the shack all beaten and bruised after being raped, after putting up a fight, the man couldn't take it no more and try to react and got killed right in front of his son. His son grew up to be a butler to serve president after president, multiple presidents, multiple generations and years of presidents. And I'm not saying that he didn't have a good life for his family. But you can see it in the context of how he just had a slave mentality, how a lot of us are raised to have that slave mentality, how a lot of us are raising our children to have a slave mentality. They say racism is born in the household. It's not. You're not born with racism. You're taught to be racist. A lot of us was born into slavery and forced into slavery. However, to have a slavery mentality, I feel like we were taught to have that. As slavery was quote unquote abolished, we began carrying it on in a different form, in a mental form. And the interesting thing about mental forms and when you hurt mentally, it's like when somebody hits you, your body heals from it. But when somebody mentally damages you, that wound can take years, if ever, to heal. And that's the interesting thing about mental slavery that we deal with as black people. It hasn't healed. But it hasn't healed because it's difficult to heal as well when you're constantly reminded of your role in this place, on this planet, in this country, when you're constantly reminded, and there's so many reminders of it. And they don't just come from the context of movies. Think about this. We got celebrities, and when someone wants to buck the system, you're constantly reminded by other black people important black people, whether it's people in media, sports, business people, who remind you that you should be comfortable with being mentally enslaved, where you should be comfortable with needing a white person to validate you. Because that's the other thing we're taught in the household. When I talk about mental slavery being taught in the household, a lot of us are taught by our parents or grandparents that you're not going to be able to be good in business. You're not going to be able to be good at this or sports. You're not going to be able to get that raise unless a white person comes along and sees validation in you or value in you. If they validate you and they give you their approval, then maybe you can become a business owner. Maybe you can become a contract. Maybe somebody will shine some light on you. And that's the only way. And see, that's a form of mental slavery that we deal with every day and we pass on. Now, I know some of you might say, okay, give me an example. Let's talk about several examples of mental slavery at its best. Let's talk about LeVar Ball. LeVar Ball, you know, his son Lonzo Ball played for the Los Angeles Lakers, for you who don't follow sports. He wanted to buck the system. He didn't want to sign with Nike. He didn't want to sign with Adidas. He came to them and said, give me $1 billion for my son for a shoe deal. And it wasn't so much of what Nike and Adidas said or Under Armour said, because they could easily say, no, I'm not giving you $1 billion. That's not the problem. It's the problem what other black pundits had to say. Media people, sports people. How dare you ask for $1 billion? How dare you ask for that kind of money? How dare you try to create your own brand, control your own brand, control your own son's brand? Who do you think you are? You should take that slice of bread they give you and not reach for the whole loaf. Was that one example? That's only one example. How about Jay-Z creating Tidal? How about him wanting to create Tidal and go against the big companies like Apple Music, like Spotify, like YouTube? Like many people told him, take a safety net. Go with Apple Music. Let them work for them. Create your own channel on Apple Music. Partner with them. Partner with YouTube. Partner with Spotify. Partner with the bigger companies. Why do you want to go out on your own? Why do you want to be your own owner? Why do you want to create a streaming system that actually benefits the artists? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to go after the whole loaf? Just take the slice of bread they give you. And when he said, no, I want to go after mine, then people are going after my own. Then people look at him like, how dare you go after that? How dare you go after the loaf? How dare you smack that hand away and not take that slice of bread they're offering you? Slave mentality, because we're taught not to go after what we want, but to accept what someone's giving us. Some people say they like slave movies because people of other races, they get to see what we went through. Some of the things we've been through in how we evolved, I guess. It's just interesting to me that people want to see that. I mean, I don't understand what's going to change by seeing what we went through. Is society's opinion going to change about black people after seeing the horrendous things that we had to experience, the conditions that we had to live in, all the horrendous things that happened to our people, how oppressed we was? They'll start thinking about things like Emmett Till and how he was falsely accused of whistling at a white woman and beaten so badly that he should have a closed casket. But his parents, his mother decided not to show the society, to show people exactly what was done to his son. Only to come decades, years later, for that same woman that accused him of that to admit that he never whistled at her. That the transgression that he was punished for never happened. And you wonder, knowing these things happen, seeing unarmed black people getting killed by police officers on camera, you would think that would change public's opinion, society's opinion on what's happening. And if that's not changing, then how is a movie from Hollywood going to teach you anything differently than you are seeing in real life? What's going to be the difference in seeing it in Hollywood? Maybe if Hollywood doctor it up, make it look pretty, shine up the diamond, maybe it look a little bit more pretty and it'll sparkle a little more, and there's a little more understanding. What about teaching us about what we were like before slavery? Because like I started this by saying, most people don't know their history before slavery. Most people know who they are. So when you criticize a black person or a young man for liking diamond chains or liking fine clothes or liking sneakers, liking valuable things, the first thing we want to do is we want to criticize them and say they worship in materialistic things. However, we forget the fact that when you come from Africa, what really was there before Europeans came was we had a political system in place. There was kings and queens there. We do come from a country that were a rich country that had diamonds, that have diamonds in the ground, have gold in the ground, oil in the ground, have very fertile soil that can grow all kinds of plants. So when you come from that kind of background, when you know your history, you kind of know where you're going and who you are. And until you know your history, you can't tell who you are. And you're more susceptible to criticism of the things you like doing. And you accept that criticism and you start looking at yourself in a different light in the mirror because you don't truly understand who you are or where you came from. Because you accepted the fact that your history began during slavery. Wow. It's deep, right? It's a deep subject. But many of you use Ancestry.com or DNA, these new DNA internet sites to look up who you was and to find out your history. Look, that type of stuff scares me. On a personal note, going off subject, that type of stuff scares me. Like, when they're asking me for my DNA, I'm like, what do you want with my DNA for? Why are you promoting so heavy that you want my DNA for? That's just kind of scaring me. That's just a whole nother subject for a whole nother day. I'm digressing right now. Let's get back on the subject. I'm sorry. But that's not going to tell you, Ancestry.com is not going to tell you your history. Because you got to think about it. Those documents that they got to look into, the census that they're going to look into, are based off information and documentation that's in this country. And all this is post-slavery, during or post-slavery. So there's nothing going to tell you about your history before slavery. So all you're going to learn is your grandfather, your great-great-grandfather was a blacksmith in this country. But what about before that? What about his father or his grandfather before that? Who was he? Who was he in Africa? Where did he come from? Okay, if you find out, yeah, you're from Zaire. What were you in Zaire? What was happening at the time frame in Zaire? What were you before you were a slave? And that's the question you should ask yourself. That's the only way you can get away from falling into the trap of society's opinion about you. Another problem is when you talk about mental slavery, and we talk about slavery, mental slavery being taught in the house, and we talk about LeVar Ball, we talk about Jay-Z and Tidal, let's talk about Steve Harvey, and let's talk about genocide. Now, why did I bring up Steve Harvey and the word genocide in the same sentence? Let's talk about it for a second. Steve Harvey had a controversial meeting with Donald Trump where he wanted to discuss some of the issues that's going on in black communities, in the urban communities, excuse me. Let me be politically correct for a second. The urban communities, and all the violence and all the problems and all the poverty going on there. Went into a meeting probably with all the greatest hopes into pushing for change. Did a whole episode on this. You can go back and listen to the episode. The problem was with that episode and where we come into genocide at is that black people just basically chopped Steve Harvey's head off and walked around marching it in the square, holding it up because of his meeting with Donald Trump. Steve Harvey felt victim to being a puppet for Donald Trump. Did he intentionally be that? Was that his intentions? I'm sure it wasn't. But he fell victim. And when he fell victim, what did we do when he fell victim? Did we try to help him? Did we try to assist him? Did anybody go up to call Steve Harvey, hey, that was a bad move, dude. Maybe you should have put the president, our new president, in touch with somebody that's in touch with these communities that could really give him the information on what he needs. Instead of being a photo op, why didn't you set that up, Steve? But see, that's not what they wanted to do. That's where the word genocide comes in. See, people always say guns kill our people and kill more black people. But the reality is it's not the guns that's committing the most genocide. It's the thing that we don't document, at least I don't know of documenting. We don't document the true genocide that happens in our country. And the true genocide that happens against our people is us verbally killing each other. Verbally and mentally destroying and killing each other. We go on air and we're so quick to tear down our idols. We're so quick to tear down each other. We're so quick to try to disbar each other or disown each other as soon as we make a mistake. So when Steve Harvey makes a mistake, a meeting with Donald Trump, the first thing we want to do is we want to disown him. Stop supporting his show. Stop supporting anything he does. because that's the true action of what we do, and that's the true meaning behind mental slavery. So we isolate him and put him on an island because of his mistake, rather than try to talk to each other, learn from each other's mistakes, to progress, to reach to a higher level. But that's not what we want to do. We want to keep ourselves oppressed, so we choose to continue to beat ourselves down. We use that invisible rifle to shoot each other down. We use social media as a tool to keep conditioning ourselves and promoting mental slavery. The mind is such a sensitive part of our bodies, and our mentality is so fragile. It's so fragile because of all the things we discussed earlier in the podcast, with the things we dealt with slavery, being divided by skin color. The light-skinned people were in the house. Dark-skinned people work in the fields. That kind of stuff still exists today. But hasn't slavery been abolished in 1865? Because that's the other thing you hear, is that slavery been abolished, and it was so long ago. Why are you still crying about it? Why are you still talking about it? 152 years is not that long ago, and furthermore, slavery still exists. Slavery still exists. What do I mean by slavery still exists? Let's take a look at the 13th Amendment and let's read what it says. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Let's go back and let's look at some things here. Let's go back and look at neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted. Let's talk about that. That's the 13th Amendment, by the way, people. You're more welcome to read the whole thing. That's a short clip of it. That's the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in 1865. Okay? Let's talk about that word where I use, where you basically can be a slave if you're convicted of a crime. Let's talk about privately owned prisons. Let's talk about what happens in privately owned prisons. So you got people who go to jail, which is mostly made up of African American people, who are given degrees. Now here's the interesting thing about once you get a degree in jail, get a college degree. Where are you going to use that college degree at? Where are you going to get a job at after being convicted for a felony? Honestly, where are you going to use it? So if you get convicted for a felony, and while you spend 20 years in jail, you get a college degree in computer science, where are you going to use that? Is IBM going to hire you? Is Apple, Google, is any of those companies going to hire you? Absolutely not. So why are you getting offered these degrees in college? What are you truly going to use these degrees for? Well, here's where slavery still exists in today. That's why I say slavery is not that long ago. And for the people who are not educated on slavery, use this as an opportunity to learn about a lot of things that's going on in the world to this day. When you got these privately owned prisons, they're breeding grounds for slavery, because I can give you a college degree, then I can pimp you out to these computer companies, to IBM. Instead of IBM paying you $25 or $30 an hour, we're paying you 30 cents an hour, 25 cents an hour. And that other $29.75 is going to me hourly. It's going to the prison company. It's big business, people. Big business. Prison is big business. Now, some of you might say, well, if you never convicted a crime, you wouldn't be there. And genocide still is happening in their communities, and that still don't justify why you're killing each other in the community. You ever understand why they call the projects? It's a project where you put a bunch of people of the same race, same social class, in a poverty situation. And what you think is going to happen? They're going to kill each other. Think about this for a second. I'm not comparing people to any rats or any animal, but I'm going to use this analogy. You put a whole bunch of rats into a barrel, right? Put them in a barrel, you slam that barrel shut. Don't put any food or anything in there. What do you think is going to happen? The rats are going to eventually eat each other. Not only are they going to eat each other, but the last remaining rat that comes out is no longer going to eat any other kind of food. It's going to eat rats. So when it gets out of that barrel, it's going to hunt and have a taste for rat meat. It's the same thing when you put a bunch of people in a poverty situation where they have to find a way to eat. They start learning to eat each other. And that's what genocide comes down to. Now, I'm not justifying and giving that excuse for people wanting to kill each other. See, we do have to educate each other. We do have to educate ourselves. But we have to see that there's a way out. There is a light at the end of this tunnel, people. Because, see, we can no longer use the excuse of what schools are teaching us, because now our world has become bigger due to computers and the fact that everybody has a tablet and a smartphone, especially in the neighborhoods of poverty-stricken neighborhoods. Now you have access to libraries. You have access to information that will help you escape mental slavery, escape poverty, escape your life. You have access to the whole entire world. You now have that window that was not given to the people who dealt with slavery. You have that window to see outside, but you gotta have that will to want it. You have to understand that no one's going to give you what you want. You have to have that self-belief in yourself that you can go after and you can achieve what you want. The interesting thing about mental slavery is it's brought on by fear. When you think about slavery in the time of the 1800s, that was brought on by fear and a need. It's brought on by fear of black people, fearing what you can't understand, what you can't conquer, so you try to destroy it. And it's also brought on by a need for economic growth. Because when you got free enterprise and you got people working for you for free, then you got growth, you got economic growth, because I don't have to pay you to pick cotton. I don't have to pay you to plant my crops. Guess what? It's all profit to me. So slavery was a two-sided coin. And it doesn't justify any of it, because there's no justification of slavery, but giving people an understanding of what was happening. You see, here's the thing, people. I can sit here for days and months and tell you, you got to find the value in yourself. You have to find the value in yourself and the net worth in yourself, because honestly, no person working is getting their true net worth. But at the same time, most of us are continuing slavery. We're planting the seeds of slavery, not in just our children and our family heads, but in other people's heads. We get on the news, we get on the radio, we get on YouTube, we get on all these channels, and what we do is we discuss why you should be comfortable with taking a slice of bread that someone's offering you rather than going for the whole loaf that you deserve. We promote you to stay focused on the fact of a timeline when you were a slave, and never to look beyond that timeline to before you were a slave, to find out who you truly are. Find out truly why you like the things you like and who the person you are. So we watch these movies and we become conditioned to believe that we are oppressed people. And all these movies do is remind you of being oppressed. And what I mean by that, and another example of that is, if a woman is in an abusive relationship, and she may have been the most amazing woman in the world, held her own, had a great job, had her own home, own vehicle, bank account, was able to take care of herself. Met a man, and he just destroyed her mentally abused her, physically abused her. And once she got out of that abusive relationship, was free of that abusive relationship, if you constantly show her videos, constantly reminding her of that abusive relationship, she will never, ever be able to heal from that. She'll never be able to heal from that abusive relationship. She'll never be able to get back to the woman she was before that abusive relationship. Because if you show her only the existence of her being happening when that abusive relationship started, she'll never be able to see beyond that, and that, look, I was an amazing person. I was a person, independent woman. I was able to handle my own business without this person. See, this is how oppression works. They don't want you to see who you truly are. Because once you see who you truly are, then you start to see your true wealth. See, we can criticize Jay-Z for creating Tidal, and we can buy into all the negative publicity about it. Or we can champion him, whether he succeeds or fails, for at least trying. Because, see, there's nothing wrong with failure. There's nothing wrong with failure in trying to go after what you want. Because even in failure, there's a lesson to be learned. There's a lesson to be learned that can teach you. But not only teach you, that can teach the people who are around you, the people who are looking to you, the people who are still under you, who are still trying to come up. Now, we may all not agree with LeVar Ball's tactics, how he raises children, how he chooses to self-promote himself, but we can learn a lesson in that. We can learn a lesson even in what he's doing, in what he's trying to accomplish. Maybe he's on to something. Maybe we should start branding ourselves. Maybe we should start asking for a bigger piece of the pie. Because if Nike's giving you $100 million contract, then imagine how much they're making off of you. So maybe we need to ask for a little bit more. Maybe we need to be trying to be 50-50 partners in some of these organizations, part of these brands that we're putting majority of work into. Maybe it's time for us to overcome slavery. Maybe Ancestry.com is on something. Maybe your DNA websites are on something. Maybe we need to start looking beyond what's been taught to us and find out who we truly are and where we truly come from. Maybe if we get a bigger piece of our history, then we'll find a bigger piece of who we are. And we'll feel more comfortable with who we are in society. And maybe society will change the way they view us. The reality is, I'm not here to knock any movies, because all those movies I mentioned are great movies, are great works of art created by great producers, and promote, I'm not going to say a perfect image of what happened, but give you a pretty good image of some of the things that went on. But our life goes beyond when we were slavery. So look beyond that and learn to live beyond that. I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Ordinary People Podcast, where it's not about likes and views, but it's about motivating, inspiring, and informing you. Peace. We want to thank you again for listening to another episode of the Ordinary People Podcast, where it's not about likes and views, it's about inspiring, motivating, and informing you. As always, we encourage you to please like, share, and comment on the video. If you have a difference of opinion, comment below or email me directly, ordinarypeoplepodcast, number 16 at gmail.com. Once again, ordinarypeoplepodcast, number 16 at gmail.com. Also, if you want to book me for a special speaking appearance, whether it's a motivational experience or you want to hear my opinion on other things, please, once again, hit me up, Ordinary People Podcast, number 16 at gmail.com. We want to thank you for listening and thank you for subscribing. Peace.